Patience of Reddit. What happened when a doctor or nurse accused you of faking it when you were actually in need of urgent medical care? My friend's dad went to the ER and the doctor said he was fine after minimal examination. Her dad insisted something was wrong and said he wouldn't leave until they ran some tests. As he was being escorted out by security, he had a brain aneurysm and died. Her family was awarded a pretty massive malpractice settlement, but they were absolutely devastated. I was in labor and because it was my first, they acted like I had no idea what was happening and kept denying what I was insisting. I was over 2 months early and handled pain so well, they acted like it was just in my head. Made me stand at the counter filling out paperwork, while I insisted I needed to push. They decided to lay me down to check if I had even started dilating, and I promptly pushed him out. I was furious with how I was treated. I still am. Same here. Well, they wanted me to wait for the doctor. Finally I just started screaming and pushing. They all finally rushed in to help me. I fell down a flight of stairs one time while working. Hit a nail on the way down and ripped my forearm open and was bleeding a good bit. Adrenaline had me going long enough for my girlfriend, a nurse at another hospital, to drive me there. I had a bloody paper towel on my arm and all the security guards and nurses assumed I was a junkie that blew a vein. Finally all the hype wore off and I kinda passed out and woke up in a wheelchair in the exam room. I don't know exactly what happened, but my girlfriend was flipping crap on the workers. She said half of them assumed I was on drugs and the other half thought I was faking it to skip the line. I wasn't dying of blood loss or anything. I just got woozy when I actually was able to see the meat in my arm for the first time. They all just watched me as I fell to the floor and busted my head on the floor. Even then they didn't do anything. My girlfriend, who's not even half my size as I'm not a small guy at all, had to pick me up and drag me into the wheelchair. Frick that hospital. Yeah, my mom watched an old lady die from blood loss in an ER a couple decades ago. She just nodded off and collapsed and the nurses didn't do anything for hours. My mom tried to yell at them to do something, but this was before she had learned English, so nothing came of it. A doctor didn't believe me when I had a kidney stone that was too big to pass. He only changed his mind when another doctor checked me and started freaking out since I was getting super sick from the stuck stone. The doctor ended up getting fired from the hospital and my parents sued him. My wife and I started to suspect that something was wrong with our son starting at age 2. He would run around all day and was an active little guy but never sweat. He also never appeared to get cold. We live in New England and he would often take his shirt off before going to sleep even in the winter months. These concerns were dismissed as a toddler's a weird sort of thing by his doctor. We later noticed that he would stop and complain about his hands or feet hurting while playing or laying in bed. These were also dismissed. We were told that the pain in his feet could be because his feet are flat or because of growing pains. We were told that it could also be attention related. The doctor said that it's not uncommon for middle children to act out. This continued for 4 years. My sister is a biologist and asked us if we ever got him checked for Fabry disease. I flat out asked the doctor if he could be tested and the doctor told us that there was no way this was Fabry and they weren't going to test a kid without any genetic history of the disorder. The disorder is genetic, and without a classic sign, one that often doesn't show up until adulthood, if it shows up at all. We waited until our son was literally screaming in bed about his hands and feet feeling like they were on fire. We demanded to get him tested and he was diagnosed with Fabry. It's essentially a metabolic disorder caused by a missing enzyme. There are many issues associated with it, but the main one is extreme neuropathic pain in the hands and feet. The pain can be random, but with my son it is normally because he overheated since he lacks the ability to sweat. He plays sports, so we have to be careful. Overactivity and fevers have to be watched out for since his body can't cool itself down. Pain can last anywhere from a couple of minutes to a couple of days. The average age of diagnosis for this disorder is around 16, so it's not surprising that his doctor missed it. Most doctors do since it's a rare disorder. That was a little over a year ago and my son is doing well now. There is no cure, but treatment allows him to live a relatively normal life just with some added pain. I couldn't imagine making him wait until his teens to get any relief. I know someone with this. He borrowed my ex-husband's cooling vest from Glacier Tech. Ex has some symptoms brought on by heat. Last year to see if it helped and wound up ordering 2 for intense days. Might be worth a check. Changing it up just a little, my colleagues were convinced a girl was just faking a stomach ache. She was about 16 years old and it was exam season, a time when we would get many sudden tummy aches. fits, etc. So I understood their skepticism, but something didn't sit right with me. I took her history myself and sent her for an emergency ultrasound of her abdomen. Ectopic pregnancy. It was ready to rupture at any moment. So I shipped her over to OBS-GYN to get surgery ASAP. She came out just fine, but man oh man did I give my coworkers a hard time after that. Exam season or not, we need to be thorough. Had another time when it was just me and one other doctor working admission. She dismissed a case of a little girl faking fatigue for attention. Thankfully I overheard her telling someone, so I went to double check. The poor girl was having a carpopedal spasm, and was most definitely not faking her condition. Hooked her up to some calcium and sent her home with meds the next day. I'm not trying to make it sound like I am perfect, but in our line of work we must always be a little paranoid. Thank you for being conscientious, thorough, and taking your oath seriously. It truly is the difference between life and death. Not me, but my best friend nearly died of a kidney infection that her doctor brushed off as period cramps. To my doctor's credit, we both kind of had a laugh at this one before the test results came back. I went to my primary because I'd been experiencing hot flashes. Doctor, Google couldn't tell me what was wrong, and I knew it didn't feel right. Well, at least we know it isn't menopause, my doctor joked. I laughed. What 23-year-old woman spontaneously goes through menopause? This one. My doctor was very apologetic. My mom went through full menopause at 36, and it turned out it was caused in part by Hashimoto's, which they also didn't know she had until she was in her 60s. I'm glad your doctor did tests and helped you. Happened to my mom. They told her she was having an anxiety attack. She was having a heart attack. Hope she pulled through. My great-grandmother died in the hospital parking lot because women don't have heart attacks. Frick that. Never let someone tell you you don't know your body. My mother had a stroke at age 32. The doctors didn't diagnose it properly for over 24 hours because they were convinced her symptoms must have been related to drugs since she was in good health and so young. My dad apparently tried to tell them that she has no history of drug use, but they didn't believe him. Now she's permanently disabled because of how long it took for her to receive proper treatment. When I was 9, I would get stomach aches when I went to school. My doctor insisted I was faking, but my mom insisted he take it seriously. Finally, they gave me a barium X-ray and saw I had a stomach ulcer. I had to take Maalox and drink milk at every meal and snack. I even had to get special permission to get milk from the cafeteria at morning recess. My teacher ridiculed me for that. She was horrible and abusive. While I never received any of her physical abuse, there were 2 other boys in my class who got it on a regular basis. This would have been 1980, so it wasn't normal for teachers to be pulling hair or knocking a kid's face into a desk. Every Friday, the 3 of us would have to stay after school while she told us all how stupid we were. My stomach aches did not get better, and the doctor accused me of some combination of faking, exaggerating, non-compliance. We literally had to save all the empty Maalox bottles to prove I really was taking my daily doses. Today we know that having me drink milk 6-7 times a day was exacerbating things. And in retrospect, my mom never really understood how stressful it was being in that class. It wasn't until the last few months of 4th grade, when they finally transferred me to another classroom, that I got well again. Later my mom told me that even she thought I'd been exaggerating when I talked about how mean the teacher was. Because I'd left the honors class, moved down a level. My former teacher still ridiculed me pretty frequently when we crossed paths, but it didn't tie my stomach up in knots. I wouldn't call it urgent medical care, but I was stuck in my room for about 5 hours on my bed with my head pressed into my shoulder because I had a pinched nerve. I had never had one before. I wasn't able to move my head at all, and when my mom got home from work she called an ambulance for me. They carried me out in a sitting position and off to the hospital we went. When we got there, it took about a half hour for me to get into the hospital bed, and ended up just giving up and leaving me sitting upright. The doctor pulled my mom out of the room and asked if I had a history of faking injuries in order to get painkillers, because I was pressing against the pain instead of leaning my head away from it. Whenever I get cluster headaches I find that counter pressure against the pain feels better than none. Had people questioning if I was really in pain or not. Not me, but my mother. She had called an ambulance because she had been experiencing chest pains, to which they basically told her she was crazy. About a month later, she passed away from a heart attack. That sucks, especially since doctors consider chest pains an emergency. Sorry for your loss. When I was in labor, the hospital had my records wrong and showed I was due a month later. I was pissed, especially since I was in labor and in a lot of pain. The lady kept arguing until she realized I was in labor. She must have heard all the crap my boyfriend, now husband, we're talking about her. Because nobody has ever gone into early labor. Not my child, my brother. He was 11 and suddenly tired and lethargic. He missed a lot of school. He hated missing school. My mom kept taking him in and they'd say it's the flu, or puberty, or mono, and it wouldn't ever get better. After a few weeks of this, my mom brought him to the hospital again, and yelled at his doctors that something was seriously wrong with her son, and they needed to do their jobs and figure out what it was. It was leukemia. They called the next morning just before 2 a.m. and said the tests came back. Your son needs to come in now. Not in the morning. Right now. I can't imagine what happens to a parent in that moment, when you know it's bad because they call you in at 2 a.m., but you don't know why. He was in treatment for just over a year, and was rediagnosed on his birthday. A few months later, he had a bone marrow transplant, and was able to come home pretty quickly. There were complications from the transplant, called graft versus host disease, like organ rejection, but the new cells try to reject you. It attacked his musculoskeletal system, causing stiffness and some dangerous situations. This October will be 8 years since the transplant, and he's cancer free. That boy loves to use the cancer card now, but he definitely earned the right. This isn't so much a faking it situation, but more of my ex-girlfriend having to deal with a really incompetent security guard that hindered her getting medical help. My ex had a severe peanut allergy, and one time she ate a Thai chicken pizza in the college cafeteria that did not list peanuts as one of the ingredients. After her throat started burning, she knew something was wrong, so she grabbed a glass of milk, which I guess helped a bit, and went outside for some air, because she was having trouble breathing. A security guard was passing outside in front of the building and saw that she might need some help. At this point my ex was panicking and frantically looking through her bag for her EpiPen. The security guard asked what was wrong and she tried to explain that she had a severe peanut allergy and needed to be taken to the hospital. When the security guard saw her take out the EpiPen, she took it from her and said that it was school policy that she be the one to do it. She then asked her to hold out her arm, so she could inject her. My girlfriend could not believe that the security guard was trying to inject her arm like it was a flu shot, and out of frustration, she yanked it from the guard's hand and put it in her thigh, like you are supposed to, and sternly told her, "I need to get to a hospital, now." For future notice to any allergy sufferers that have EpiPens, if anyone tries to take your EpiPen and play hero, kick them in the shin and do it yourself. Likely you have more experience and training with auto-injectors than anyone else. When I was 16, I was in a really dark place, and one day I decided to confide to my doctor that I thought I might be depressed and see what he would recommend it. Dude straight up laughed in my face and said, "You're not depressed. You're just a teenager." I told my mom I wanted to change doctors after that, and it took another year and tons of self-destructive behavior before I sought help again. Same thing happened to me. I begged for help at 15. Got told I was an overdramatic teenage girl that just wanted attention despite how intense my mood swings were and the suicide attempts. Never asked for help again until I had a 4-month depressive episode at 22. Turns out I'm bipolar too. Was 12 years old and had a heart problem that was just starting to show. Arrhythmia and palpitations. Only happened when overexerting myself. Go to cardiologist and was accused of faking it to get out of chores and soccer practice. By the time I'm 15, my heart is absolutely unreliable throughout the day. During an attack I would lose my sight and pass out. Same cardiologist still claimed I was faking it. Kids just don't have heart conditions. 16 years old and my heart finally stops. Luckily I passed out earlier at school and was in the nurse's office when my heart stopped after another episode. Woke up in the hospital, and BTW had a heart deformation that required surgery. My mother blew her lid according my doctor of wanting to see me dead. Went to his office and threw his degrees and awards off his wall at him and was screaming at him. Only reason she didn't sue was to prevent assault charges. Simple echocardiograph showed growth causing the electricity to pump my heart to go in circles. Wasn't fun having heart attack simulations nearly every day for 4 years. Before anyone asks, was poor and that cardiologist was the only one on my mother's insurance. This is not as serious or urgent a condition as the others, but it still manages to raise my blood pressure years later. Starting from when I was about 7, I would have terrible stomach pains, which my pediatrician claimed was attention-seeking behavior. He told my parents that they should punish me anytime I complained of stomach problems. My parents, who love yelling, jumped at a new reason to scream at me on a nearly daily basis. When I went to college, I was finally diagnosed as having a hiatal hernia, just like my grandparents, father, and aunt. When I was a kid, they even commented that I had the same symptoms they did, which for my pediatrician meant that I was just mimicking their complaints and didn't have the same condition. Because it had been untreated for so long, I now have to worry about Barrett's and esophageal cancer. Lucky me. You found the luckiest horse show in the world. Like this video and you'll be very lucky for 2 days. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.